Welcome to the meeting of the Council on the 19th of February 2020. Could I remind councillors and officers to use microphones and request that those attending the meeting ensure that all mobile phones and other communications devices are in silent mode. Could I also remind you, those attending the meeting, that it will be recorded and be available to you on YouTube via the Council's website following the meeting. Before we commence the business of the meeting, I would like to make mention of the severe flooding that took place in parts of our local authority over the weekend. As we all know, a huge amount of rain fell in a relatively short time on already swollen rivers and saturated ground, affecting some communities more than others. I am sure you will wish to join me in thanking the Council and Tayside Contract staff who worked very hard in severe weather to protect life and their property. Not forgetting all the community volunteers who turned out in large numbers to assist the efforts of our staff. Good teamwork. Thank you all. And we also have something else just before we begin our meeting. We're going to have a short video about the independent care review, and that will be followed by Councillor Shires and Councillor Rebecca saying a few words. So I hope you will bear with us. Thank you. The clip is supposed to last for 4 minutes, I'm told.
In October 2016, the First Minister made a commitment that Scotland would come together and love its most vulnerable children and give them the childhood they deserve. She asked me to chair the Independent Care Review to do a root and branch review of the care system. I knew that the most important thing that the Care Review would do would be to listen. Everyone at the Care Review and the team from the 1,000 Voices worked really hard to properly listen to everyone that wanted to speak to the Care Review about their experiences. And this was over 5,500. Over half were children and adults who were care experienced and their families, the rest the unpaid and the paid workforce. And I'm so grateful to everyone who shared their story. So many shared the most traumatic, intimate experiences of their lives, in the knowledge that it could not change what happened to them in the past, but it could make a difference for Scotland's future. Every single thing that the Care Review heard has formed the basis of the conclusions it's reached and the reports it's produced, and the promise of change Scotland must make to its children and its families, built on 5 foundations. At the centre of this promise must be voice and listening. Children must be listened to and meaningfully and appropriately involved in decision-making about their care, with all those involved properly listening and responding to what children want and need. There must be a compassionate, caring, decision-making culture focused on children and those they trust. This will require a shift in power, with children and families being listened to, and what they say must guide decisions that are made. Scotland must love its families. Where children are safe in their families and feel loved, they must stay, and families must be given support together to nurture that love and overcome the difficulties which get in the way. Scotland must do more to keep families together. It's really important that children are safe, but families also have to be nurtured. The Care Review has listened to what families need and developed 10 principles so all types of families can be supported. There will be times when children can't live with their families. If that happens, those children must be cared for. The Care Review heard lots of stories about what it feels like to live in care. Where living with their family is not possible, children must stay with their brothers and sisters where safe to do so, and belong to a loving home, staying there for as long as needed. Whenever it's safe to do so, brothers and sisters must stay together. Sibling relationships are lifelong, and Scotland must do everything it can to keep them together. Scotland must make sure that all children are loved and nurtured, and not stigmatised because they cannot live with their parents. Scotland has got to become a good parent. Scotland must also look after the people who help and support children and families. The children that Scotland cares for must be actively supported to develop relationships with people in the workforce and wider community, who in turn must be supported to listen and to be compassionate in their decision making and care. The people that care for children are so important. They love, nurture and provide good relationships. Scotland must make sure they're also supported. And finally, the system must meet everyone's needs. Children, families and the workforce must be supported by a system that's there when it's needed. The scaffolding of help, support and accountability must be ready and responsive when it's required. At the moment, everything is too complicated, and there are rules and pressures that stop people doing the right thing. The whole support system has to be responsive so that children and families can be nurtured. The system must value what children and families value. Please read the reports the Care Review has produced. And more importantly, please commit to keeping the promise to Scotland's children, as by pulling together, we really can make sure that all children in Scotland grow up loved, safe and respected, so they can realise their full potential.
Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm delighted to make this statement to Council today, and thank you for allowing us to bring this report to the attention of all councillors. The First Minister referred to the powerful simplicity of the report and what it says that we, and most importantly the young people who experience it, should expect from a good care system. This is possibly one of the most important reports we can consider as councillors, and I would urge you all to read it. As convener of lifelong learning, I would ask that this council is wholehearted and passionate in its collective commitment to the recommendations of the review. We can all be assured and indeed proud of how seriously Perth Kinross Council takes its corporate parenting role. We can demonstrate a track record in protecting and transforming our care services to meet the needs of our children and their families. It's always uplifting when at the corporate parenting meeting some good news is shared about one of our young people, and to see the pride on the faces around the table demonstrating how seriously the parenting element of the corporate parenting role is taken. Nonetheless, I would ask that all elected members support a commitment to taking forward the recommendations of the report without delay. This report highlights the opportunity we have in public life to emulate those loving relationships which many of us perhaps took for granted when we were growing up, and to commit to the promise of creating a new blueprint for our children which ensures that they do grow up loved, nurtured and cherished. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rebecca.
Thank you, Provost. I have no hesitation unreservedly endorsing a collective whole council, whole organisation and indeed whole chamber commitment to taking forward the recommendations of this unique and most significant review. The findings and recommendations provide a powerful vision of how we must care for our most vulnerable children and young people. Children and young people must be heard and, most importantly, listened to, and our first priority should always be to make sure we keep children out of care and thriving within their families wherever possible. Our investment in Perth and Kinross in new ways of working, our early interventions such as Reach and Navigate and Connections show how this can work in practice. All our children deserve a stable home life with lifelong loving relationships. We must keep listening to and working alongside our care experienced young people, such as the impressive fine young individuals and others on the edge of care, so that their voices shape the changes
Very much. I'm sure we'll all agree with the sentiments that have been expressed today. Okay, can we now move on to the absence?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We have apologies from Provost Malloy and Councillor Band.
Okay. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Notice of motion in terms of Standing Order 35, Beechgrove House. Can I invite Councillors McCall and McEwen to speak to their motion?
There we go, we have sound. Thank you. This motion is brought before Council today to ask that officers consider the widest range of options to repurpose both buildings and the site at Beechgrove House. The ambition of this motion is in two parts. Firstly, to consider the retention of Beechgrove House site by Perth and Kinross Council to address gaps in social housing provision or in health and social care provision, and to consider alternative uses that will support the need to increase the pace of and capacity for fuller health and social care integration in Perth and Kinross, in line with the Scottish Government's priority ambitions for the country as a whole. Conventional thinking, and indeed what was the general consensus among my fellow ward councillors at the time of the council's decision to close the care home facility, was for the site to be repurposed for general housing or perhaps sheltered housing. However, the needs of our residents can be more varied and certainly more complex, and these needs cannot always be met by conventional housing solutions. On the doorsteps, the main issues that residents raise with me are that of specialist housing requirements, social care and mental health services, respite capacity and therapeutic care. Residents want to see health, mental health and social care services delivered locally wherever possible. Most people want to stay in their own neighbourhoods where there's familiarity, friends and family close by, and they want services to be delivered in their locality where they can be accessed easily. So I think a focus on conventional housing solutions is too narrow when we have an opportunity to be innovative and forward-thinking and to consider options that meet the current and emerging and specific needs of residents who have limited options available to them from the conventional housing stock. For example, there is currently a shortage, certainly in my ward, and I assume elsewhere too, for alternative options for residents requiring more specialist accommodation solutions that is often aligned with health and social care needs, and that cannot be met by the general housing allocations policy. For example, tenants who wish to downsize or who seek sheltered accommodation, but where we have limited property options, residents with existing or emerging needs across all age demographics who require specific housing solutions, such as those suitable for those with sensory impairment or noise sensitivity needs. Intermediate solutions for residents who leave hospital but need additional support before returning home, or who could benefit from an alternative option between hospital and care home. The options appraisal, therefore, is an opportunity to include consideration of how these particular needs can be met, and other needs that I haven't mentioned here, and to do so in consultation with other organisations who can inform the Council's options appraisal. Organisations such as Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership, the Centre for Inclusive Living, PCAVs, Shelter, Autism Support, and other disability support organisations. Options for repurposing the building could include, but not be limited to, conversion to conventional sheltered housing, intermediate care and enablement facility that would provide people leaving hospital with somewhere to recover and be ready to return home, rehabilitation or other therapeutic services, short-term day or residential respite services, or a step-up, step-down facility for mental health services. In the event that the building cannot be repurposed, then the options for the wider site should consider these specialist housing and service needs, and that so many of our residents are in need of. And I commend this motion to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We have a growing population and people are living longer. This creates an increase in demand for health and social care services, and in a model where we want people to be independent and supported in their own homes for longer, we must ensure there are enough accessible or adaptable homes across Perth and Kinross. These homes must be suitable for older people, disabled people, or anyone else in need of specialist accommodation, making it easy to live near family or work. The fact that disability continues to be an indicator of poverty, welfare reforms have reduced benefit payments for the disabled, and while the elderly live on poor pensions, fuel poverty is a real threat. The availability of good quality, energy efficient social housing helps to reduce poverty and allows these residents to live in warm, affordable homes. Beechgrove House is an opportunity to provide homes that are energy efficient with reduced emissions and lower energy bills, making it easier for the elderly and disabled residents to heat their homes in an affordable and future-proof way. Developing Beechgrove gives the opportunity to create safer, stronger, attractive, sustainable and integrated communities where residents can continue to live in their community knowing they will stay in contact with their neighbours and friends. They continue to access the services that they and their family use even when their needs change. This requires building the right number and type of homes placed in such a way as to strengthen the existing community and meet the needs of the individual. The Scottish Government has a consultation paper called Housing for 2040, and there's copies of this in the Councillors' Lounge. And there's a couple of sections in this I want to quote from. Under the vision section, there's a section called Homes That Meet People's Needs. And there's one that says, my lifestyle. My home is my well-being and the well-being of my family. It supports me through different stages of my life and can easily be adapted. Another section on my services, I get the help I need to live independently at home, supported by the advanced technology. I can access health and welfare, education and other services because my community is well connected. And I think that developing Beechgrove House can meet these aspirations. This motion to conduct an options appraisal of Beechgrove House gives our excellent housing team the opportunity, with the full support of this council's elected members, to explore and develop and plan modern, adaptive, energy-efficient homes to meet the needs of those in our community with the most complex needs, while allowing them to stay in their communities and in touch with their family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Just to confirm that I'm happy to agree with Councillor McCall's motion around Beechgrove House and site, and happy to bring back an options appraisal for consideration of the Council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I too agree with the principle outlined within the motion. This is a very important site. It's in ownership of the council, and it's in our gift to decide what future use it should have. And I think I've already discussed with the Executive Director and Environment Service and various correspondence the continuing nature of making sure that we do carry out a detailed and thorough evaluation of the site, its facilities, its opportunities, and also the options that might be available for it. In fact, we visited the site as part of the Chief Executive's tour of the Perth South Ward. It seems many months ago now, but we did discuss when we were there the potential for the site and what it maybe would deliver. I think the existing building has limitations. I've no problem with having a look at it. I think it's got limitations in terms of the access and also meeting the standards of the 21st century. However, there's no problem in having a look. But also, the existing footprint of the building, if kept, would in fact constrain development of the site to a degree which might be one thing that would need to be considered as part of any option appraisal. At one time, the ambulance service were reviewing their relocation, but I think I understand from the local manager that they've now decided to stay on site in Hill End Road, which is immediately adjacent to this. Therefore, there's no likelihood that the site would be extended in any way. We also have a care facility for children immediately beside it in Woodley Cottage. So the site has a history of care. In fact, way back in the mists of time, I moved the patients out of Boroughmuir Hospital down to the Tay and Erin wards with a different hat on at Perth Royal Infirmary. So I support the principle, and I look forward to hearing the report of the option appraisal.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I am fully supportive of this motion for an options appraisal that includes an examination of the Beechgrove site's viability for health and social care and mixed tenure housing purposes. Colleagues across this chamber are very familiar with the financial challenges we are facing as a council. These challenges apply also to the health and social care sector, over which we have a shared responsibility alongside NHS Tayside, which is similarly financially constrained. Therefore, when fixed assets in an ideal location are available which could improve and accelerate the further integration of health and social care services, whether that be through provision of step-up, step-down facilities within Perth City, or by way of sheltered housing, or through adapted housing to accommodate people with disabilities, we really do need to make full use of these. With the major focus that there is at the moment on mental health issues, rightly so, I have seen at first hand the hugely positive impact of people having their own suitable, adapted if necessary, roof over their heads. And while this local authority is already doing much more than most in this regard, I strongly urge colleagues to embrace this opportunity to look at doing still more. That was going to be the end of what I was going to say today, but one further point that I have to make, which is that we have awoken this morning to the appalling news of the UK government's plans to control immigration. These may well have a severe adverse effect. In these circumstances, we really do need to make the most opportunity of the fixed asset opportunities that present themselves to us. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I fully support the motion, and one of the reasons I fully support it is that myself, as well as ward colleagues and those on the Housing Committee, will be very familiar with the fact that we've had the Health and Social Care Partnership together with Perth Kinross Council. We looked into building 5 housing units down in Invergowrie to provide housing to 5, I think, individuals who had very complex needs. That fell through about 1 year ago, and that wasn't the first attempt at catering to those residents. So my hope is that this motion and what results from it could be some of what leads to a fix for those people who, it's been said, are trapped in a hospital environment, even though they don't need treatment per se. They have complex needs. They don't require a hospital environment, so hopefully we can get them into a housing environment rather than a hospital environment as a result of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I absolutely support the motion, and I'm delighted at the idea of something being done in terms of Beechgrove House. And I know officers have been working hard on how that site will be utilised. Personally, I think there's a great opportunity here for us as a council and our partners to look at the possibility of an intergenerational housing project, similar to those in existence in other European countries such as the Netherlands and Denmark. This could support both older people in sheltered housing and students studying at local colleges. And there are huge benefits identified from intergenerational housing, including combating loneliness, increased understanding between generations, and a lot of knock-on health benefits, particularly mental health benefits of having more interactions. And I think this is an ideal location for such a project, and it could be an excellent opportunity for us here in Perth and Kinross to lead the way in potential future types of mixed-use housing. So I think it would be an excellent opportunity that could actually combine a number of the aspects mentioned in the motion, both in terms of social care, reducing pressure on social care, but also providing housing. So thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I just really wanted to add my support to the motion. We have an ageing population in Perth and Kinross, a growing ageing population in Perth and Kinross, and with that will come extra needs, and we certainly need places like this to help. And I think the options should be investigated, and I fully support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm extremely heartened by the cross-party support on this proposal, and I'd like to thank Councillor McCall for taking the idea forward with officers to come up and formalise the fact that we will have an options appraisal. And I hope when the appraisal comes back, we've given the officers a steer of what we envisage the site would be best used for, and hopefully when it comes back to the council or to whatever committee, we'll all be singing off the same hymn sheet, and we can create something that's innovative here in Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no more comments, we will accept. Right. The minute of the meeting of the Council of the 18th of December. Can we approve that minute? Okay. Not guilty. Now we have the minutes of the committee meetings from the 10th of December to the 29th of January. The local review body, note the minutes of the Common Good Fund of the 18th of December. Agreed. The local review body of the 10th of December. Councillor Anderson.
For noting, Deputy Provost.
Councillor Wilson. Planning Development Management Committee of the 17th of December.
Move for noting, Deputy Provost.
Happy to second.
Local review body of the 7th of January.
For noting, Deputy Provost.
Happy to second.
Licensing Committee of the 9th of January.
Move for noting, Deputy Provost. Happy to second.
Planning and Development of the 15th of January.
Move for noting, Deputy Provost.
And happy to second, Deputy Provost.
Environment Infrastructure of the 22nd of January.
Move for noting, Deputy Provost.
Second. The awkward place to be. Lifelong Learning Committee of the 22nd of January.
Move for noting, Deputy Provost.
Wait, second, Deputy Provost.
Housing Committee of the 29th of January.
Move for noting, Deputy Provost.
Happy to second, Deputy Provost.
SP&R of the 29th of January.
Move for noting, Deputy Provost.
Happy to second, Deputy Provost.
Okay, thank you. Now we move on to the Treasury and Activity and Compliance Report. We'll invite Stuart Mackenzie to introduce this report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and good afternoon, councillors. This report advises Council of Treasury activity undertaken during the quarter ending 31st of December 2019. As previously reported, the UK Treasury amended its lending arrangements on the 9th of October, increasing Public Works Loans Board rates by 1%. As rates increased, there was no new borrowing undertaken during the quarter. Two maturing PWLB loans totalling £10 million were, however, repaid, reducing the Council's long-term debt from £514 million to £504 million. The Council's total investments reduced from £185 million to just over £165 million during the quarter, in line with cash flow requirements. Investment income similarly reduced from £1.3 million to £290,000 during the quarter. This movement reflects how investment income is reported rather than any reduction in returns or the value of the Council's investments. Investment income is shown in relation to new investments made each quarter. In comparison to the previous quarter, with no further borrowing undertaken, there was a significant reduction in new funds available to invest and therefore in investment income. There were no breaches in compliance with Treasury and investment policy, and all prudential indicators remain within approved limits. The Council's Treasury strategy is updated in accordance with the approved capital budget. As the budget is not due to be set until the special Council meeting on the 6th of March, approval is sought to continue to apply the current strategy until the next meeting of the Council in April. Happy to take questions, Deputy Provost.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. The Head of Finance, Stuart Mackenzie, referred there to the refinancing that happened before the 1% increase, outright 1% increase in Treasury rates, the Public Works Loan Board rate. And that was immensely, and I think it's been commented on before, well-timed and well-judged. And I think all of us recognise just how good a move that was. The question I want to ask is, there was no recourse to Public Works Loan Board, i.e. Treasury funds, on the last quarter of last year calendar. Is that likely to be an ongoing trend? And what I'm really getting at, are you starting to look at other alternative sources of finance when, with 50, 30-year money, you're now probably paying a top side of 3%?
thank you for your questions, Councillor Donaldson. And first of all, thank you for the positive endorsement. The team greatly appreciate the support of elected members. We did borrow significant amounts of funds in the last quarter over the period of July to September of last year. There's therefore sufficient resources to maintain our current level of capital investment, not only in the current year, but into next year, and probably a fair part of next year. Apologies. As elected members would envisage, given the increase in PWLB rates, a number of other investment organisations and institutions have come forward with alternative products, and we're currently assessing those.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I thank Mr Mackenzie for including the unemployment rates for the UK and for the European Union? And can he confirm that unemployment in the EU is 65% higher than in the UK?
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. If I can refer elected members to section 2 of the report on page 15, which shows the UK unemployment level in November as 3.8% and the equivalent figures for the Eurozone as 6.3% in the paragraph below it. I trust to Councillor Illingworth's arithmetic, but there's a significant difference between those two figures.
Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Excuse me. In Appendix 2 on page 27 of the pack, under long-term debt outstanding, there's reference to the interest rates applicable to money market loans and LOBOS. I was wondering, in what circumstances is borrowing money or long-term borrowing through those mechanisms appropriate? And is there a plan to shift to cheaper Public Works Loans Board borrowing instead?
Councillor Barrett. I'm just getting to get my bearings here. We're on Appendix 2, and we're looking at short-term borrowing.
Long-term borrowing, paragraph C.
Okay, got you. Yeah. So our lender option borrowing was undertaken some time ago. That's relatively flexible compared to the situation down south, but that wouldn't be an investment. A borrowing instrument we would look to increase for the time being. In terms of other opportunities, elected members will be aware that one or two authorities have looked at bonds and going to the market. That's usually been for significant individual pieces of investment. But what we're seeing is banks, for example, coming forward with some alternative products. The PWLB rates, although they have increased by 1%, still remain very competitive. And if I can just give a sense of that, we receive what's known as a certainty rate, which is 20 basis points or 0.2% below the spot rate. And the certainty rate in 50-year money this morning was 2.75%.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I've been very fortunate last year to have some time with Mr Mackenzie while he explained the budget process and spreadsheets and things like that. However, my memory of retention is probably not the best. And it is very noticeable that every time we get a paper on the budget, there's probably only a couple of people that ask questions. Mr Donaldson, obviously with his profession, will ask a question. I'm wondering if it's possible that we can get like an executive summary which simplifies it for us, you know, just what we do good, what we do bad, just something that explains it, because, you know, I know we're legally bound to to have this report, but just something to explain in simple layman's terms, Stuart, like you did for me, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Mr Mackenzie, I'll leave you to answer that one.
I appreciate the compliment, Councillor James. I'm going to take it and keep it. Thank you. Elected members may recall some time ago we had our Treasury advisors up to provide a presentation on Treasury management. Would that be something that members would be interested in, if I could explore that? Okay, I'd be happy to arrange that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Councillor Coates?
I'm just assuming, looking at this sheet, that the £10 million in the long-term debt repayment has been dropped off on the long-term debt outstanding.
That's correct, Councillor Coates. So, effectively, what's happening is with the level of capital programme the Council has approved, which is £700 million, including the housing revenue account, and that's subject to discussion after Council on the presentation. We've been borrowing more to support that level of investment. On this occasion, so effectively we borrow from PWLB, we borrow over, generally speaking, for longer term, and at some point those loans become repayable. And what you're seeing here is 2 of those loans being repaid. Effectively, in a quarter we didn't borrow any additional money, so the total amount outstanding goes down.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No, I'll invite Councillor Lyle to move the report.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. In line with best practice, elected members are provided with an update on Treasury management activity on a quarterly basis. This report sets out the activity for the period 1st of October to 31st of December 19. The Head of Finance has already provided elected members with a detailed analysis on the activity that is set out in the body of the report, and he's also answered questions. The proposed extension to the Treasury strategy to the next meeting of the Council is a pragmatic and sensible approach to allow the updated capital budget to be reflected. Once again, Deputy Provost, I welcome the fact that there are no breaches in compliance with the approved investment strategy, and the Council is asked to note the contents of the report. I would only add one point following Councillor James's question. Executive summaries, by their nature, can be a quick and easy way for councillors to appraise themselves of something, but given the complexity of the Treasury activity strategy, it would be dangerous to make assumptions from the executive summaries without actually reading the papers in depth. Okay, happy to move the paper.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Mr Mackenzie and his accountancy team for another comprehensive report on the Council's Treasury activity and compliance strategy. Once again, members can be confident that our financial resources and the Council's financial standing are in good hands. I'm happy to second the report.
Very much, Councillor Duff. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Donaldson.
I wasn't going to make a comment, but can I just say I welcome Councillor Ian James's comments and the offer of a seminar teaching something like that on public finance. I also do think that it's something the SIPFA, the professional body, did about 10 years ago, and they no longer do, and was a kind of a 40-page guide to public finance. And that really, I think for elected members, I think they'd find it really quite helpful in just understanding, you know, because a lot of it, you know, if you get past some of the initial wording, it's not that difficult to understand. The other point I'd like to make, and I would certainly like to know more on, is the possibility of issuance of local authority bonds. I think there's probably a critical mass as issuance costs, and it just may not be for ourselves practical or economic to
Just a comment. I don't think you really need to answer that one. Happy to agree this report. Okay, thank you very much for your interest. Now we move on to paper 7, the Perth Kinross Community Planning Annual report, I can invite Fiona Robertson to introduce the report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillors, can you hear me? Great, thank you. The report in front of you summarises the work of the Community Planning Partnership over the last year. It's the second annual report from the CPP since we produced our new community plan in 2017. It's a brief cover report for you, councillors. It summarises and gives you an overview of progress, key achievements, and there are some examples in the body of the report, and also areas for priority and focus over the next 12 months. Also, briefly to add that there is work underway to align the community plan, which is very much about focusing on and tackling the most stubborn inequalities in Perth and Kinross with the wider Perth and Kinross offer, which we will be continuing to design and co-create with our communities over the coming year. So, councillors, I'm happy to take questions along with David Stokoe on the report. Thank you.
Much, Fiona. Are there any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I turn you to the report itself, page 43? And I think everyone will welcome the aim for changing ways of working, which it tries to involve communities and make them feel as if they are actually listened to as part of changes that are made. If you go on to page 53, it says that only 23% of people actually feel that they are listened to with regard to changes that are made. I'm thinking in particular, like the biggest consultation exercise we carry out as a council is the local development plan. And as everybody here will know, when we submit the local development plan to the Scottish Government, it's the reporter who decides what happens in Perth and Kinross, not so much the councillors. So I want to know if that's actually now been looked at to make things like the local development plan more democratically accountable, and how we're going to address the low percentage of people who feel they're actually getting listened to by both local authorities and central government. Thank you.
I think Chief Executive would like to answer that one. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson, the very reason that we're undertaking the Perth and Kinross offer is to co-create the future of public services across Perth and Kinross. And as part and parcel of the Perth and Kinross offer, we'll be looking at different ways to consult and to engage and to encourage participation with all our citizens across the community.
If I may, thank you very much, Chief Executive. Does that mean that the Scottish Government, in things like the local development plan, are actually going to be listening to what we say, or is it just a sort of internal discussion with ourselves? The things that we come up with, if we find that people don't feel as if they're getting included in major decisions like that, is that going to be listened to by central government?
Councillor Robertson, you'll appreciate it's not for me to comment on behalf of Scottish Government. We will, however, be doing our best to take the views of all our citizens into account in terms of how we co-create and design public services across Perth and Kinross.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. First of all, thank you very much for the report. I think it's an excellent report with lots of good points in it. It's lovely to see that we have our young people attaining literacy and numeracy milestones at key stages increasing from 87 to 90%, which is excellent. But on the what next page, page 51, I see that we're looking to increase household recycling from the current 52% up to the target of 60% by 2020, which is now. So taking into consideration the fact that we're doing this with the community, what community engagement have we had in an attempt to get householders to level up to that 60% target?
There are a number of things that we've been doing, Councillor McCall, and I'd quite like to point out that, because it looks like there was a significant dip in performance between, the two earlier years in reporting and, the third year that's raised in this. One of the reasons, in fact, the most significant reason for that was, in actual fact, the fact that we had removed timber from our recycling contracts, and then we weren't allowed to count that as recycling. So it was just the way that the figures were collected. So we continue to do very well. We are still one of the highest performing councils in terms of recycling. But we're not resting on our laurels, because we would like to actually to get beyond the 60% if that's at all possible. So one of the things that the Council agreed last year in the budget was a number of changes to our recycling centres, for example, so that we will be adding in an additional member of staff who is there to then support, sort of the members of the public when they go to recycle. And we will continue to do that, sort of going forward. But equally, we will continue to do a lot of awareness raising in terms of recycling. But I would also suggest that that also, sort of very much includes people in this room. And we're continuing to look at how we continue to recycle within all of our establishments, including, sort of to High Street.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Interesting that Barbara just spoke about recycling, because I'm going to start off by saying I don't know what page number I'm on, because I'm using the digital version and not the paper version. But under 2.2, the fourth bullet point down, the employability project. So 407 people were supported, which is great. 59 individuals successfully gained employment. That's excellent. I know that's not 68%. So I'm wondering if someone can explain what the percentages mean, because it says it had a positive outcome. So positive outcome, I'm making an assumption, is not getting a job but is something else. So therefore, what would a positive outcome be, please?
So
you're absolutely right. A positive outcome isn't necessarily moving into a job. It could be moving into a training programme, further education, higher education, somewhere other than just moving back into being unemployed and claiming benefits. So it's a range of destinations. Volunteering, for example, would be a positive outcome as well. And for many who have been very long-term unemployed, volunteering is a very practical and very realistic first step back in towards employment.
That answer your question? Yeah. Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question is on the Community Investment Fund, and I just wonder what work has been done to quantify the impact on tackling inequality that SIF has made.
Thank you for the question. We will be doing evaluation on both years of the fund and bringing a report to Strategic Policy and Resources Committee later in the year. Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. For me, the most concerning table or page is on page 43 of the report, a change in Perth and Kinross, where it lists some of the assets that we have here, but also lists the challenges. And if you go through them, dependency on tourism, agriculture and hospitality means low wages. Our levels are 6% below the Scottish average. We've already heard Councillor Illingworth say that unemployment is extremely low in across the UK. We've uncovered significant inward poverty caused by the low rate of pay and rural poverty across the area. We have social isolation in rural areas and we need digital connectivity. We've got an ageing population, but alongside this we've welcomed 12,650 migrants from Eastern Europe.
Excuse
there is
me.
a question at the end of this, if you would indulge me.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. There's 12,650 migrants from Eastern Europe and further afield. And my question to officers is, if obviously we need the migrant population to help us with our lesser paid jobs in tourism, agriculture, hospitality and the care sector, what work are we as a council doing to ensure that we can fill these jobs vacancies?
I think David Littlejohn might be able to answer this question, hopefully.
I think there's a couple of kind of points in there. I guess until today, we weren't entirely clear what the UK government's response to migration would be. Now that we understand what the proposal is, and it's still a proposal clearly to go to Parliament, it puts us in a much better position to understand what actions that we could now start to take forward. And I think you made the important point. It's very important to differentiate between low wage and low skill, because I think the point's been made several times in the media already today that many of those jobs are incredibly skilled, and we shouldn't demean the value of, for example, a care job. But there is an issue about we need to get that kind of clarity of what that means following Parliament's decision on it. But absolutely, our economy is a large number of those skilled workers in key sectors, and we need to now work with those employers to understand what the real implication is, particularly in agriculture and particularly in care.
No.
Councillor Lang, two things to follow on from what David Littlejohn has said. Firstly, Scottish Government have a national workforce plan, and there's a huge amount of work around recruitment and retention happening about health and social care. Secondly, and perhaps importantly, the Scottish Cities Alliance recently held a workshop with all the city chief executives. There was a number of key themes on that agenda, but clearly the things that you've outlined today featured heavily. So we looked at net zero in terms of the whole focus on low carbon and climate. We looked at sustainable development, we looked at technological changes, and we looked at population and inequalities. So on the back of that, there will be an action plan that all city chief executives will be signed up to, and similarly all the chief executives of the national agencies, so for example Skills Development Scotland, the Scottish Funding Council, Scottish Enterprise, to address some of the concerns that you're raising this afternoon.
Thank you. If there are no further questions for officers, I'll invite Councillor Williamson. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question relates to page 51 about, excuse me, Perth and Kinross Community Watch, which according to the statement here has been rolled out to an area with 1,000 people now connected to the service. My understanding is that's only 812 people. According to this paragraph as well, it also says the alert system keeps communities and businesses informed about the operation of community safety services within the area. I was just wondering when was the last time Perth and Kinross actually used this system?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wilson. We don't know the answer, but we will check and get back to you as soon as we can.
Could I come back?
Yes.
Thank you. The system was actually used at the beginning of February to notify people about road closures. My question is why was this system not used to inform the public about Storm Dennis, for example? Is this system being used, or is it just being left to wither on the vine?
It's certainly not the intention to let it wither on the vine. You know, sort of, I think that sometimes, you know, sort of in trying to deal with things, you know, sort of we don't always pick up the correct channels, but we'll look into that and come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. Can I just ask a broader question, because this is about community planning and community empowerment. And the Best Value Added Audit Report in August of last year, it was on the whole very positive towards the Council and its operations. But of the 8 recommendations made, 2 were specifically on community planning and community empowerment. In particular, the Council should improve how it involves communities. Could I ask Council officers if they believe that the Perth and Kinross offer will be the means by which we can address those criticisms, or are there other measures beyond just the offer and its mechanisms, and just what envisaged are the timelines to counter those criticisms? Thanks.
I think the Chief Executive might talk, then Fiona Robertson. I'm not sure who's going to do.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, the Perth and Kinross offer will be the mechanism in which to take forward the recommendations from the Best Value Audit. In terms of the timelines, there is a working group set up that involves elected members. So we're currently looking at the framework in terms of how we engage and consult around the Perth and Kinross offer, and that will happen over the course of the next year. I don't see the Perth and Kinross offer as being a start and a stop. I think it will become the way we do things around here. So I wouldn't want to put definite timescales, but I can assure you we've already undertaken consultation with 1,200 participants, and we will continue to engage across our local communities.
Fiona, do you wish to add anything to what's been said?
Only very briefly to add to what the Chief Executive has said, Councillor Donaldson. There are some specific things that are happening, including the working group which Stuart Mackenzie chairs on meeting the joint target between COSLA and national government on 1% of allocatable spend in council budgets being devolved to communities for decisions. There is work underway on that. We also rolled out, and this is alluded to in the annual report, a lot of awareness raising work with communities themselves about the opportunities to participate in local decisions, local asset transfer, and so on. I would also just briefly add, I said at the top of this report that we would be doing work over the next 12 months to align the community plan within the offer. The community plan, the local outcome improvement plan, is very much about equality. And I think increasingly we see the community plan, as we refine and refresh it over the next 12 months, as focusing very clearly on where we need to do work to address inequality, the low wage economy, for example, social isolation, etc., within the overarching offer. The offer is the big picture, and it itself, as the Chief Executive has said, will be co-designed with our communities. So there is a lot to do, but there is also a lot of work in train around this.
Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, I'll invite Councillor Lyle to move the report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This is the second annual performance report, and it highlights areas of positive community planning activity, these have brought real benefits to individuals and communities across key areas of social isolation, education and learning, health and mental well-being, and employability. It also highlights those areas which will be focused on during 2021 as part of the evolution of the Perth Kinross offer. As for Councillor Robertson's point regarding the hierarchy of decisions, it is the Scottish Government who sign off the local development plan, but we do have some influence in that towards the outcomes in the local development plan through the consultations that we've had across our local council areas and communities. Finally, you're asked to note the annual performance report, which has previously been considered and approved by the CPP board. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. As mentioned, this is the second annual report covering the year 2018-2019. It outlines progress against each of the strategic objectives by way of case studies, performance indicators, and plans going forward. Particularly, it mentions the first local child poverty action report, which will be the starting point for tackling child poverty in partnership with other stakeholders. And also mentions, of course, the success of the Community Investment Fund. Highlights of the year's work include the successful Big January get-together in East Perthshire, offering people across the area a chance to meet community members informally over food and entertainment. The Slapshots group, encouraging vulnerable parents to join a swimming group with their children, and the Holiday Hunger programme in Lytham, which organised activities for children over the summer holidays and ensured they had a healthy meal. The report outlines positive outcomes that our work is achieving, but it acknowledges that there is no room for complacency and details where we must do more and/or improve. Happy to second the report.
Thank you. Any comments, Councillor Robertson?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. In response to, I think, the very valid point that Councillor Sarwar made about feedback on the Community Investment Fund, I know personally, and it's just anecdotally, that it's made a big difference in our area of Kinrossshire. I happened to visit at Kelty Bridge Hall, which is right on the you can actually throw a stone from Kelty Bridge from the hall into Fife, so it's as close as that. It's right in the boundary. And they applied to the Community Investment Fund for support to replace the floor of the hall. And that allowed them then to actually draw in other funds from other sources. And the hall is now amazing. New kitchen, new floor, totally decorated, totally modern, DDA compliant, and it's a fantastic facility for that literally quite remote community from Perth itself. So it shows if the fund is used properly, we can actually make a big difference and support our rural communities. So I hope that the fund will continue. I know it's now in the hands of the budget process, but I personally think it's made a huge difference to lots of the lives of people throughout Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Councillor Trebek.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think I promoted you the last time I stood up to speak and called you the Provost, but sorry about that. I would just like, on page 48, I'd just like to make a commendation, but in doing so, a couple of points around that, which I humbly think might be quite important. And it is around the case study in the Letham Holiday Hunger Club, which Letham St Mark's hosted, and it was a huge success. I think it became organically an activity club at which you got a healthy meal rather than a holiday hunger club. And I think as we move forward, it's really important that they become activity clubs and not holiday hunger clubs. That means that they have whole community engagement without fear of stigma and segregation. And I think that's a really important point that we must take on board. I would like to see more of it across Perth and Kinross, because of course it wasn't just in Letham that we did that, but I think that's a very important point, humbly. And if I can point to the what next, which says support the implementation of the Perth and Kinross Child Poverty Action Plan, and number 2, continue to make progress in raising attainment strategy, etc. I think those two things are connected, actually. And I think moving forward to that, it is important that we have an uptake in school lunches throughout the year, because it's not just in the holidays that feeding kids is important, because hungry kids don't learn. And I think it's really important that we get the school meal uptake back to where it should be going forward. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I think members are right to be concerned about the impact of our points-based immigration policy and the impact that that can have on key sectors of our local economy. And I think that makes it even more important for members of this chamber and elsewhere to get the message out in our communities that members of the EU community countries are welcome here. Those that have settled here are very welcome to stay, and that the efforts that we employ with our community planning partners, people like the Citizens Advice Bureau, people like PCAVs, in working with the different EU national groups in Perth and Kinross to support them to successfully apply under the EU settlement scheme are going to be even more important in the future towards the end, or between now and the end of the year. But I think the key thing is for us to emphasise the important messages that people are welcome, and that their contribution to diversity and to our broader culture are extremely welcome too. We are, I think, the 6th top performing local authority in Scotland in terms of numbers of EU nationals registered under the EU settlement scheme. I've mentioned the supports provided by the CEB and PCAVs. Those are augmented with supports available in our libraries, and just this month with the scanning facility for biometric and digital capability across in the Registrar's office across the road. And I think we need to get awareness of those supports and facilities made to its widest base across our community. Thank you.
Mr Duff.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. The Community Planning Partnership Annual Report contains many examples of the very positive work which this Council and its officers deliver. These include significant reductions in the number of families presenting as homeless, one of the lowest rents in Scotland, the best local authority performance in Scotland for looked after children in family and community placements rather than residential care, the creation of the 1.2 million Community Investment Fund to tackle inequalities, which we've heard about, and a success rate for helping people into employment significantly above the national average. There is still much work to do, as highlighted in the next step section, and in the challenges that we face in areas such as the recommendations of the Independent Care Review, which we heard about earlier, child poverty, our carbon emissions, etc. But I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the partnership and all the officers involved in delivering these achievements, and look forward to further advances in this area in the next report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd like to wholeheartedly agree with the comments of Councillor Barrett, who put it as eloquently, probably more eloquently, my thoughts than I could, and I totally endorse what he was saying. was to return to the comments by David Littlejohn. We maybe, after the news, yesterday's news on immigration, we maybe understand better the position, but we're definitely not in a better position moving forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Deborah Pross. If I may, one of the highlights for me reading this report was about the big January get-together that was hosted across Eastern Perthshire Action Partnership, where we had a lot of intergenerational meals that were provided at a time of year where isolation is often at its highest, and depression in the winter is particularly an issue for us, especially in rural areas. So I just wanted to take the opportunity as a member of that Action Partnership to thank the volunteers that were involved and all the hard work that was done.
Thank you very much. If there are no more comments, are we quite happy to agree this report? Thank you. Now move on to Scotland's Low Emission Zones consultation on regulations and guidance. I will invite Jim Valentine to introduce this report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Good afternoon, councillors. Low emission zones are a tool available to local councils to use to assist the transition to zero carbon economy. The Scottish Government consultation paper, which has been circulated, invites comments on the construction of LEZs, taking into account critical factors such as the length of any transition period required, the types of vehicles to be included in any LEZ, and it asks for comments on the societal impacts, particularly the risks to those most disadvantaged by the introduction of the legislation. There is no easy fix to the problems of vehicle emissions in urban centres, but an LEZ strategy gives local authorities another option to tackle carbon reduction and poor air quality alongside parking control and the promotion and support of active travel and green public transport. The appendix to the report sets out the Council's detailed response, and Alec Deans and Lachlan McLean of our transport planning staff are here to deal with any detailed questions which you may have.
Thank you very much. I think this is something that probably affects each and every one of us. Oh, maybe there's one person who does not pollute the atmosphere. Any questions? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I question in particular, and in two contexts, the response proposed at paragraph 2A, which of the proposed national LEZ exemptions do you agree with? Please be as specific as possible in your reasoning. The first item, I see no grounds for giving a blanket exemption for military vehicles. The only military vehicles that routinely act in support of the emergency services are EOD vehicles, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be meeting emissions targets. And other military vehicles, to my mind, should only be exempt for a properly authorised exercise requirement or operational need. And there are already many places around the UK where military routes are designated so that military vehicles do not pollute and otherwise damage the environment. The second specific item I want to bring attention to is the matter of historic vehicles. We have in the past enjoyed in the city a number of historic vehicle displays, and I would suggest that genuinely historic vehicles, as opposed to old bangers, should be exempt from, if you like, the LEZ provisions, where they are attending a properly organised, if you like, historic vehicle display, and they're vehicles that are used for high days and holidays. And in that context, I would invite historical vehicle operators associations to be included in the list of agencies at item 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Professor. A couple of questions relating to paragraph 1.2 on page 55. I think, really on behalf of those of our constituents who suffer an ever-diminishing
Sorry,
and
Councillor
poor...
Simpson. It was a question from Councillor Parrott. He wasn't allowed to get an answer.
Oh,
sorry, my apologies.
I'll contain myself for a moment.
I'm not sure who's going to actually answer it. It was... Mr Valentine will answer a question.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I was going to wait and see if there was a bunch of amendments at the end. I don't think that, I'm looking at the team here, I don't think there are any issues with specifying the detail. I think you've put forward good arguments in terms of what the Council might want to present. So I think the team here, they're nodding, the team will be happy to include those changes.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Provost. We'll try again. My questions relate to paragraph 1.2, really on behalf of our constituents who suffer an ever-diminishing apology for a bus service, for instance, and other things, and those certainly outside this chamber that recognise that the climate emergency is now and not sometime in the future. Could we get an idea of when the further reports will be provided? It does mention that in paragraph 1.2, and if we get a time scale on that, and also an assurance that all this consultation is not an excuse for inaction. So I wouldn't want the consultation to be used as an opportunity to kick the petrol can down the road as usual.
Very much. Jim will answer it.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I think in terms of the other papers that come forward, there's still a degree of work being done under the National Transport Strategy. I couldn't give you a definite timescale of this, but I would hope that by the end of the year we would have something moving in each of these areas.
Okay. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My concern is around section 2A in the proposed response or responses, and in particular around blue badge holders. Unless I have misunderstood what this is saying here, it's really saying that it would be difficult to create a system that would allow blue badge holders to come into the city in times when they're otherwise not allowed to, and therefore we're not going to do it. But my understanding of the blue badge scheme is that people who are unable to walk for whatever reason more than a short distance are allowed to come into the city and allowed to park under current arrangements. If we were to effectively ban these people from coming into the city in times when the LEZ is applying, would that not make them more socially isolated and unable to go about their business and go to various shops, etc.?
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. I think in terms of the response we've got there, we've recognised the difficulty. We're not offering a solution, but we've recognised that it's something that people need to consider. So I don't think we're saying people should be banned. I think what we're saying, I'll ask Lachlan or Alex to say it had their tuppence worth in a minute, but I think in terms of what we're saying, we're recognising that there are big issues with the proposal and how we deal with blue badges, and that the government really has to think about that. So I think we're agreeing with you. We maybe just need to sharpen up the wording. So I don't know, Lachlan, if you want to say any more.
Yeah, with respect to blue badge holders, the blue badge is assigned to a person rather than a vehicle. So that's where it starts to get more awkward in terms of how do you actually administer it. So in terms of a scheme, ideally you want no human intervention. You want to have a scheme where anyone who's entering and has an exemption is exempt. So I think that's something that the Scottish Government need to work on in terms of blue badge holders. I mean, it could be open to abuse. It might be that the blue badge holder isn't in the vehicle at the time. So I think that needs to be explored in more detail. So I think that's where I'm coming from in terms of my response there.
If I may just follow up on that, I'd just like to say that I'm pleased to hear these responses, but I really would like the wording of the response to be revisited to make sure that the correct message is coming over there.
Actually, it's only to endorse what Councillor Drysdale was saying. I think we can sharpen the wording on this.
Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. It's just firstly a comment to say that it's a good report, but I have a question which is probably a hypothetical question really, and that is, how would you, if we had a scheme like this, how would you envisage it being implemented? I've experienced myself with the London scheme, whereby you have a number plate recognition system which recognises your number as you go in, and you're charged for entry of £5 or £10. I can't remember what it is now. I wonder, is that the sort of system we're going to use? That would obviously require significant investment. And am I right to assume that the charges that we would make on that scheme would be used to recoup that investment back in? Is that the concept we're thinking of, or is it going to be more of a penalty charge if you're caught in there?
I think, Councillor Braun, and I'll pass it over to Lachlan for the detail, but I think the desire would be to have a scheme that was as frictionless as possible, so ideally some kind of automatic number plate recognition, etc. The shortfall that we have just now is that cities have started rolling out schemes which aren't all the same. So there's a degree of variation both in how technically they work and in how people have been targeted. So with that, I'll pass over to Lachlan because he'll have a better understanding of the thought to the working group.
In terms of the operation of the LEZ, it would be an automatic number plate recognition system. So whenever a vehicle went in, it would be checked to see whether it is a qualifying vehicle or whether there's an exemption for it. And in that case, if the vehicle shouldn't be in the zone, it would be fined. And then a penalty charge notice would be issued to the vehicle owner. At that point, you have 28 days to pay for the penalty charge notice. If it's paid within 14 days, there's a 50% reduction. So the charges are detailed within the report that the Scottish Government are recommending. And then there's also a tiered system. So if you went within the zone 3 times, say, you would then move up to the next tier level. So if it was a car and it was £60, you would then move up to 120. If you continue to offend, you'd then move up to 240. But if you were to acknowledge your errors in entering the zone, you would then move back down a tier through the system. And that's my understanding of how it would work there.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm very supportive of obviously LEZ policy coming forward for areas that we have an issue with. I have a worry though regarding the buses and coach operators. As you know, in the rural areas we get the worst, very worst vehicles, unreliable and emitting loads of emissions. My fear is that if we insist on low emission buses, hybrid buses in the city, which is very good, that all that will happen is that the rural areas again will suffer by getting all the stuff put out to them. And I hope that when the consultation with the bus and coach operators comes on, that it's not merely a migration of old buses out to rural areas. So can we have some answer about that and what the officer's views is on it?
Mr. Anderson, I agree with everything you've said, but it's not really a question there. I'm just wondering how you're expecting. Jim's going to try.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. No, I have raised the very issue that in other groups. It's a genuine concern that has been raised throughout the consultation on the National Transport Strategy. So it's something that operators are aware of, it's something that Transport Scotland are aware of, and the local authorities and the elected members across the country. So I think these concerns have been raised, and it's really what actions come out of these concerns being raised. But the concerns have been raised.
Can I just add to that as well that the Scottish Government have a retrofitting fund for vehicle engines for bus operators. So there's a fund, I think it's about 8 million that's available. So bus operators can tap into that money as well to improve their engines so that they get up to, it's not a guarantee that they would become a Euro 6 engine, but if they were able to get up that way, they can do that, they can use that funding.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. The answers to question number 14, which is basically about additional comments, given what the officers have said already about the kind of increasing tariff of fines for regular transgressors of an LEZ, Why do officers feel it would be reasonable to penalise legitimate users of car parks for the abuse of people abusing the local, the lower emission zone? Secondly, the paragraph regarding redirection of traffic away from implemented LEZs onto smaller side streets, can that not be addressed through sensible design of low emission zones? And I'm not an expert on Crieff, but I've certainly been able to drive from one side of Crieff to the other without going through the main centre of town. So there would appear to be an alternative route to the main road. And would that part of the response not be better made as a point of principle as opposed to making a reference to a town where it may not actually apply?
Time, you answer.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Just dealing with your last point first, there are ways to cross Crieff other than going through the high street, but the place pressure, and having been involved in the issues around Crieff for a long time, the place pressure in other areas out with the high street. So dealing with the high street is an issue. I think in terms of the city centre parking, maybe I think the wording's not. We need to maybe look at the wording there, because I think it's really about saying that you're not just looking at LEZs, you're looking at city centre parking issues, etc., in conjunction with LEZs. So I don't think we're saying that we're necessarily going to get a reduction in the number of people going into LEZ by doing something with city centre parking. So I think we'll just look at the wording there, and Lachlan's nodding at that. And your final point was? With regard to the design of the LEZs themselves and not forcing people onto side streets. Yeah, I think just as we do with controlled parking zones, we'd be looking to see what's the best shape of an LEZ for any particular settlement that we're putting them into.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I just ask one question and then a supplementary? The first is the senior officer ultimately responsible is Jim Valentine, but the report has come from the transport planning team. Maybe that's understandable. But can I just ask on this, in particular, since they're the authors of the Crieff Air Quality Action Plan and other items, is Kirsty Stevens and her team in environmental health, what kind of input do they have into the whole issue of LEZs?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. The whole of the Council's climate change team across the services are linked into these reports. So it's not transport planning doing this in isolation. We're looking across the piece, relying on the data from Kirsty, etc. And Lachlan can explain, or Alex can explain, the sort of technicalities of how everybody gets together.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Sorry, it's a really good question. We have liaised with Kirsty Stephen and our colleagues quite extensively in terms of the response we've actually put in. In terms of you'll appreciate there's quite a lot of work to be done in terms of whether we're actually going to take these schemes forward, because there are lots of issues with them. We have the traffic model. Kirsty has our air quality model, so we'll be looking at the two of them and effectively together to try and come up with the best solution for this.
Thank you. And yeah, just as supplementary, I suspect this will be an issue that will come up a week on Saturday at the engagement session at Crieff Campus on the Air Quality Action Plan. However, one point I'd like to refer to is page 61, and it's 1B, and it's the construction of park and choose sites. And this may be, I think it's an important point, because it's the lack of a park and ride facility, park and choose facility on the western edge of Perth for people who have no other choice but to travel into work, to commute into Perth for work from Crieff, from Comrie and from St Fillan's, and from areas that are now suffering from cutbacks in the frequency of bus services. So could I ask What is the timelines on the establishment, the creation of a park and choose facility to cater for traffic coming in the A85?
I think Mr Valentine will answer that.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. As you may be aware, the park and choose sites around Perth are part of the Perth Transport Futures project phase 4. When that project was kicked off, we were working to particular targets, particular levels of congestion, particular air quality. Since that project kicked off, we've also had a change in terms of government policy and increasingly tight targets in relation to these areas. So I think what the Council need to do as we go into the capital programme is to look at what are the issues that we're facing in the immediate years, and that may require a reprioritisation of funding in some areas. But I think that's a discussion for a later date.
Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm on question 3A, and I'm content with the answer we've given, but it has flagged up a couple of other questions. It's regarding buses. So, first question is, will buses be charged more, and is this likely to discourage people to use buses? And my second question is, I'm thinking about, say, a busload of people that come into the concert hall for something. How would that operate?
Someone from the parking might answer this one.
Hi there. Yes, if a bus was to enter the LEZ and it was to be deemed not to meet the criteria of the engine, of the Euro 6 engine, it would be fined, and it is fined at a higher rate. Generally from other cities, they've found that buses and HGVs contribute more towards the emissions, so that's why they feature at a higher cost rate as they're entering the zone.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that? So, from my second point was just say a busload of people come from Glasgow to go to something at the concert hall. Would that bus have to stop outside the LEZ? And would people then have to get their own way into town? Or is there a way they can get dispensation to come into town to drop people off?
There are options for exemptions within the guidance that has been produced. So if we were to host a large event per se, we could have exemptions for certain vehicles.
Thanks, Convener. I notice this as a consultation, but there's nowhere on that consultation which gives us the options for saying, well, actually, we don't really agree with and don't want LEZs. The way I see it, it's just another way. Motorists always cops for it. And if we're going to ban traffic, you know, businesses are having a hard enough time anyway. And it's along the same lines as...
You can make your comments after. Is this a question for just a ramble?
Yes, the question is, why was there no option for
to say you don't want
no,
it?
We didn't want an LEZ? And it is
prescriptive. This is a consultation document.
Yes, it's a consultation, but it's a consultation, but it hasn't allowed us to say, actually, we don't think we should.
But this is not a document produced by the Council. This is a Scottish Government document. We are following... Okay, I know what you're saying.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I was going to bring this up in comments, but I actually have a question at the end of this as well. As we look at the probability that we will, at some point, have to introduce one of these zones to meet our climate emergency commitments, I do welcome in Part 1B the comments within the report that we've made regarding creating positive options for people when they're coming into the city. That it's not just about a stick we've got carrots, about people being able to ride bike, you know, use wheel devices, which I assume is scooters, or environmentally friendly buses. And the point I want to make, and this is where the question comes in, is that it's important we don't wait till we've got to implement one of these zones before we put this type of infrastructure in place. That needs to be in there before we start to look at this seriously, when we're starting to look at how we're going to change the way that we, or do the transformation that we need. And in relation to that, these changes need to be in front. And following on from Councillor Anderson's question and the relevant response, Are we looking at bus operators now that are potentially coming through the city centre with high polluting buses and trying to educate them on this fund that's available to help them retrofit now? Not wait till we've got a zone in place or anything like that, but let's try and tackle this while there's funding available from the Scottish Government to do that.
I think the Chief Executive would like to answer this question.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think it's really important, councillors, that you remember you recently asked the officers to bring forward a Climate Commission report and a number of actions, and I think that will deal with the point, Councillor Waters, that you're making. So I think it's not about waiting until we have to introduce one of these zones. It's actually about the proactive action that we're going to take in terms of Climate Commission across Perth and Kinross.
Okay. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, maybe hopefully draw this to a close. All the points raised are very pertinent and will have to be discussed. I was wondering, this is really, we're discussing officers' responses to a consultation, which we can look at online and get all the questions there. I take it we can feed into consultation ourselves as individuals. I think the questions we're now talking about, introduction, has nothing to do with this paper. But I think we'd ask that maybe if you could have a briefing session, it would save a lot of these questions we're getting now on how an LEZ may work in Perth if we were to have one in future, and that would draw draw this to a close.
I think Jim Valentine, you're going just to agree with what's been suggested here.
Yeah, I think, Councillor Lane, once we get the air quality management results back, you know, to probably into the autumn, then we could report back on LEZ implications by way of a briefing.
Thank you.
Councillor Williamson, I presume you are no longer going to ask your question from what's been said. You're still going to ask your question despite what your group leader has just suggested.
Yeah.
Okay then.
Yeah, whip me, Henry. I tell you what it was sort of like there seems to be no mention of agricultural vehicles within this report. And have I missed that, or is? I mean, I know agricultural vehicles tend to fly through Perth and maybe Creek City Centre, but is that something to consider as well?
That was something that was raised. It was mentioned within the consultation document, I'm sure, agricultural vehicles, but we felt that they shouldn't be exempt. They're the same as other vehicles travelling through. So at this stage, we felt an exemption wasn't merited for them.
Okay, thank you all very much for your questions. You know, we also had a briefing yesterday morning about climate emergency, so we realised, you know, we're going to have to do something. It's not all just about talking. Some of the things that actually happen we might not like, but this is a consultation and it's a chance to feed into it. I will now ask leaders to move the report.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'd just remind councillors of Councillor Lane's point that this is a response to a consultation on regulations and guidance from the Scottish Government. Perth and Kinross Council have prepared a response to Transport Scotland's consultation on the proposed arrangements and standards for the establishment and operation of low-emission zones. The purpose of this consultation is to gather a wide range of views, set out future arrangements relating to nationally consistent standards for low-emission zones. Proposals and findings for the consultation will be set out formally in regulation and guidance to support the new Transport Act. The consultation is focusing on the standards relating to emission thresholds, potential exemptions for vehicle classes, and for the level of appropriate penalty charges. Perth and Kinross Council have prepared a response to the consultation as we may need to implement a new low-emission zone in the future, or zones. The consultation is not about the design or the implementation of low-emission zones in any individual town or specific city, nor does it determine whether Perth and Kinross Council will require a low-emission zone in the future in our air quality management areas, particularly in Perth and even Crieff. A screening exercise will be undertaken by Perth and Kinross Council to determine the likelihood of requiring a low-emission zone. The screening exercise is due for submission by the end of June 2020 and will be reviewed by SEPA and the Scottish Government thereafter.
The consultation has a series of questions and response has been prepared in Appendix 1 of this paper. The recommendation is for the Council to endorse the attached officer response in Appendix 1 and for the submission to the Scottish Government. It also requests, following Councillor Simpson's comments, that a further report be brought to this Council before the end of 2020, outlining further developments. Thank you. I'm happy to move the paper.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Whilst we're talking about the low emission zone, this is part of the Scottish Government's Transport Act. It's fair to say that I have some issues with that Act. The workplace parking levy, you won't be surprised to learn, is something I don't support. The Pavement Parking Act is something I welcome, but have real concerns about the workability of that, the serious financial implications that will come to this Council. True to form, we've been told what we will have to do, but not how we will pay for it. However, on to this report. This report and the subsequent responses by the Council show just how complicated the process of putting together any sort of legislation is. The responses by the Council are well thought out and comprehensive. They look at every possible situation and challenge where necessary, and I am very pleased that we've had the opportunity to influence that today, and I hope the Government will consider them fully. I'm happy to second Deputy Provost.
Are there any further comments? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. I have to say I do agree with the comments made by Councillor Forbes, but can I say this is a challenge, but it's also perhaps an opportunity. And hopefully in years ahead, people who want to come to Perth by public transport, whether it be train or bus, will be able to easily put their bikes on the train or bus, and come into Perth and then get off and cycle to wherever they're wanting to go within the city. We're busy as a council working actively to try and improve the cycling facilities within the city of Perth and also out with Perth. So let's try and join this all up together and make it really worthwhile for the people who want to use either Shanks's pony or non-polluting forms of transport.
Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just really wanted to say that whilst I acknowledge this is just a consultation, I have a little concern, perhaps it should be borne in mind, that setting up a low emission zone will entail considerable investment at a time when many vehicles are now changing to electric power. And we may find ourselves with a low emission zone set up, which is possibly obsolete. So I know it's a consultation, but it's just a concern that I have that we may be setting it up when most vehicles will be electric and won't therefore incur a charge.
I've got a little fear here that this afternoon is going to turn into the same story just being put over in a different way. I think we've all agreed this is a consultation document. We want to do climate change. We want to move forward. I don't really think that the comments are going to be any different. And I think the officers will take on board the questions that were asked, and this will be incorporated into the response that is going from the Council. Are you quite happy with that? Agreed.
Yes, thanks for that, Deputy Provost. I do think that we're going way off message here. This is a consultation paper. We've had Councillor Robertson complaining earlier that that people don't listen to the communities and they just have things imposed on them, and then complaining now that we're having a consultation. I don't understand that the questions should be related to this and the comments to the paper in front of us, and this whole is not related to the paper. I'm afraid you've let it go way beyond the paper.
I note your comment there. Are we quite happy to move forward with this paper? Thank you. Okay. We're now on to paper 9, which I read the titles, Perth and Kinross Council's proposed response on the Scottish Government's consultation paper, Planning, Performance and Fees. I will ask David Littlejohn to introduce the report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This paper summarises the proposed responses to the key consultation questions set out in the Scottish Government's work programme, Transforming Planning in Practice, which stems from the Planning Scotland Act 2019. The consultation principally focuses on properly resourcing the Development Management Service by setting out proposed changes to existing application fees, together with the introduction of additional services for which charges could be made. It also proposes allowing the planning authority to waive or reduce planning fees in certain circumstances. If the proposals are accepted by government, the intention is to have the new fee arrangements in place by mid-2020. The consultation notes that planning fees currently account for an average of 63% of the cost of determining an application. As such, the government expects the increased fees should improve resourcing and performance across the planning service of local authorities, which will continue to be measured through annual performance reporting. In relation to performance, the consultation also focuses on the performance of the planning system, both for applicants and the wider public. It proposes a new vision for the Scottish planning system and also the introduction of a national planning improvement coordinator. The government anticipates that these changes will result in a more valued planning system, which is also resilient and capable of providing the service that local people and planning applicants expect, whilst also delivering the increasing challenges placed upon it. The Council is invited to consider the proposed response to the consultation in order to allow the suggested amendments to be incorporated into the final submission to the Scottish Government. I'm joined today by Christian Smith, who's the Service Manager for Development Management and Building Standards, and Christian coordinated our proposed response, and between us we're very happy to answer any questions or points of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Deputy Provost. As David pointed out, the average planning fees cover only 63% of the cost of determining an application. This statistic is presumably placing an alarming burden on the planning and the environment service. I've got a couple of questions or clarifications perhaps. At the top of page 70 is another planning fee statistic I find alarming. The consultation suggests that maximum possible fees be increased to £150,000, apparently being equal to 2,058 dwellings. By simple arithmetic, 150,000 divided by 2,058 comes to almost 73. Deputy Provost, can I ask where this figure of 2058 comes from? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question there. There is a sliding scale of fees that would be relative to individual houses. So it starts off at a higher level, then goes to an intermediate level, and then goes to a reduced level, depending on the number of houses that I've proposed. Once that is then all calculated up, that's how you would get to the number of houses that that would relate to.
Well, just looking at the figures that were given previously, it didn't seem to add up to me.
I think that,
that's good.
I could get back to you on the arithmetic. It's listed from the paper that's produced by the Scottish Government, but there is a sliding scale of fees that goes from one level for the first number of units, another level for the next number of units, and then another level for the further units beyond that.
Indeed, and we have quoted in the paper. 600 and 600 for the first 10, 450 for the next 40, and then after 250. So I just puzzled at where the actual this figure that took it away down to £73, where that came from, because it just seemed to be.
I'm not sure exactly where you're referring to, but yeah, you're correct. It's 600, 450, and then 250, depending on the numbers, yep. And then the 2058, I think you said.
2058, which is quoted in the paper, and I just don't. Yeah. I couldn't relate that to it. Perhaps I'm not.
Perhaps this information could be sent to all elected members after the meeting, rather.
We'll talk later. The other question was page 87, question 36 refers to pre-application discussions. Deputy Provost, has it been found that pre-application discussions speed up the determination process for both the applicant and the council authority? And on what criteria would the suggested percentage discount be set?
I think your first question was, is there any evidence to indicate that it's a smoother process once there's pre-application discussion? Yes, my experience would be that, and I think that is of many of my colleagues across the country. The second part of your question, sorry?
Yeah, on what criteria would the suggested percentage discount be set? You know, a suggested discount on the, whatever it was, But what would the criteria be that would determine that percentage?
I think that's a matter we're putting to the Scottish Government for consideration as to what the discount would be for further investigation. We're not suggesting a discount of a particular percentage. We're saying perhaps you could apply a discount, but that would not exceed a certain level.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. If the Scottish Government is to set fees for appeals to the local review body, will there be an expectation that the local authorities still have the autonomy to decide the number of councillors sitting on these appeals and the need for an independent consultant?
Yes, there's no direct correlation between the ability to ask an appellant to pay for the service and the local authority, the planning authority, and the council's decision as to how to organise the planning committee system or the local review body. That's entirely at our discretion. There's a minimum number that's recommended in terms of the local review body. As long as that was retained, it's entirely the council's discretion.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm on page 78 and the question number 4, I think, about the proposed responsibilities of the Planning Improvement Coordinator. I presume this is a new animal created for central government rather than something that would exist at local level. There's not a lot of detail in the report about the responsibilities. Maybe we could get a quick outline of that. But I'm not sure where this fits into the hierarchy. Where do they relate to the Chief Planner or any of the other planning hierarchy at the Scottish Government? Maybe we could get a wee bit of advice on that, please.
Thanks, David. Answer, yeah.
I mean, I'll start and let Christian pick up. The National Planning Improvement Coordinator, the proposal, remember this is a consultation proposal, would report to the Chief Planner in Victoria Quay. The intention is it's a national resource to work with all planning authorities, but there is a reporting back and there is a coordination of performance, and the principal role of that coordinator would be to discuss with individual planning performances where some weaknesses have been identified and agree some actions for improvement. But Christian might have some more detail on the proposed scope of the role.
Yes, thank you. And I think at paragraph 1.9 there's a link to the Scottish Government's background papers, and there's a lot more information there as to what the role of the national coordinator would be. But yes, you're correct, it would be at the national level reporting to various high-level authorities and reviewing the processes and systems that are followed, and also dealing with any disputes that may arise.
Thank you.
Quick supplementary, do the officers feel this post is going to be useful?
I think in the response we say yes.
Yes, yes. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks again. The response to question 50 appears to be somewhat bald. I was wondering whether, what would officers' response be to, in what circumstances would a supplementary fee for environmental impact assessment be warranted? And I think providing that as an answer to the consultation would be far more useful to the Scottish Government. I'm thinking of circumstances such as the Grundon incinerator application that we had in Perth City Centre a number of years ago, where there were absolutely massive costs of assessing the environmental impacts of that. And certainly in those sorts of circumstances and other applications where there is a significant environmental impact to be assessed, and certainly a complex assessment to be assessed, I think in those circumstances it would be appropriate that full cost recovery of something like that was or certainly substantial cost recovery was appropriate.
I think it's a reasonable point, and that might be something that the members want to discuss. We're very mindful that in preparing an EIA, there's a significant additional cost on the applicant, and that in many respects is one of the issues that many applicants regularly report back to us, is the cost actually submitting an application that requires an EIA. Yes, there is a cost in assessing that. The intention may well be, in terms of the type of application, that additional cost in assessing an EIA is absolutely why the overall proposal is to increase the planning fee per se, rather than have an additional charge. And it's striking that balance, I think, is really, really important between supporting applicants and charging applicants and scrutinising. It's what the fee is arguably for, in our opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm on the bottom of page 70 with regard to hazardous substances consent. It concerns me rather that the fees haven't changed in 25 years. I would seek a reassurance that in that period of time, the planning system has kept up to speed with changing regulation and legislation in respect of hazardous substances as far as planning goes. Thank you.
Yes, that's correct. It's just the fees that have not changed.
Okay. Thank you very much for all your questions. I will ask Councillor Lyle to move the report. And bear in mind, this is another consultation document.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Just again to remind members that this is a response to the Scottish Government's consultation paper. And we have done a thorough consultation. A properly resourced planning system is vitally important to supporting our economic growth ambitions, whilst also ensuring that our built and natural environment is appropriately protected and enhanced for all who live in Perth and Kinross. Sustainable development is not an option, it is a necessity. In terms of the number of applications submitted and determined, we are one of Scotland's busiest planning authorities. So it is this consultation which is of particular interest to this Council, both in terms of a decisive move towards full cost recovery of application processing, but it also ensures the planning service is on a journey of continuous improvement. I would ask that members agree to the submission of this consultation response and happy to approve the paper or move.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm happy to second this paper. As has already been stated a couple of times, this is a Scottish Government consultation, and it is up to our planning authority to assess that and to answer accordingly, which they have done, and I would like to thank them for their prompt response to this consultation and to have sent that off, and I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy with the paper. I'm very happy with the responses given by the Council's officers, because that's what it's about. Do we approve of the responses? I do. And I'm particularly happy to see that retrospective applications will be penalised rather heavily, or deservedly heavily, frankly. And question 48, e-planning will be incentivised rather than paper copies coming in because people can't be bothered using their computers. I'm particularly happy with these two. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I have to say that I'm extremely happy with the proposed report of the Scottish Government. It's a good response and mirrors the comments of both officers and elected members. Some applications are complex and very time-consuming. Therefore, the fees charged should reflect the officer's time committed. A developer or landowner can profit greatly from a positive planning decision. However, if the fees are not set appropriately in the beginning, public money should not be required to fund a project that can profit the developers or owners. I also agree wholeheartedly with the proposals on the charges for retrospective applications. This is an issue that requires addressing, and one hopes that it will successfully progress through the Scottish Government. With that in mind, I hope we get a positive response from the Scottish Government on this consultation, and planning fees can reflect the full cost of the work required on these applications.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, we're happy to accept the officer's response and from the Council. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we move on to paper 10, appointment to committees and outside bodies. Can we agree the changes in the membership set out in the agenda for items 1 to 12? Agreed, thank you. Can I now ask Councillor David Dugan to make a statement?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. David Dugan, is it? I didn't realise we're convening the council on a Sunday now. I'm very grateful to you, Deputy Provost, for allowing me the opportunity to make a few comments at this, my last council here in Perth Kinross. The messages of support and congratulations I've received from councillors across this chamber are evidence of what I've known to be the case for some time, and it's an element of being on this council which I value, and that is that when we put our minds to it and choose to do so, we can put the personal comfortably ahead of the political when it's appropriate. I need to emphasise, Deputy Provost, what an honour it was to be elected as the councillor for, one of the councillors for Perth City North. It was an immense honour, and one which I give up today with a somewhat heavy heart. I've always applied myself fully to campaigning for the SNP since I left the MOD in 2007, and to be elected to Perth Kinross Council in 2017 with the highest first preference votes of any new councillor in that election, almost more than Councillor Shires I got back then. Then again in 2017 as the only SNP candidate, I'm sorry colleagues, to beat the Tories in that poll is something that, for good or ill, rightly or wrongly, I'm very, very proud of. Perth City North is an outstanding part of our city, with many examples of community capacity working to improve outcomes for people living in the area. We have 4 outstanding parent councils supplementing the work of our dedicated staff in our 4 brilliant primary schools, Letham, Goodleyburn, Tulloch and Our Ladies. In addition, I'm pleased to have worked with and supported our community organisations. We have many, but just to name some, including Tulloch Net, Letham Community Group, Tulloch's Blooming Glade, Letham for All, Letham Climate Challenge and the Tulloch Community Group. Like everywhere, Deputy Provost, we have in Perth City North our challenges, but there's very much more positive than negative in this diverse section of our city. It remains an essentially productive and vibrant part of our city, even as a 3-member ward, as opposed to its 4-member previous iteration before our ward was sliced and diced by people far from here with little regard for, much less knowledge of, our local communities there. People forget too often that the vast Inveramond industrial estate is within Perth City North, representing what must be the highest concentration of diverse employability anywhere in Perth Kinross. The opportunities of this are of course enhanced by the completion of the new A985 junction to the north of the estate, planned and budgeted for by the SNP, and which will open up the remainder of the development land there with attendant opportunities. I will, Deputy Provost, unashamedly touch on some of the key elements of significant pride for me as a local member for Perth City North. And in my time representing this ward, the SNP has initiated or budgeted for the transformation of key elements of the area, including the redevelopment of the 208 site into housing, the multi-million-pound expansion of Letham Nursery, a much-needed footbridge over the A9 Western Bypass at Tulloch, redevelopment of the social work office in Tulloch into housing, the new £11 million Tulloch School, the crematorium's renovation, new housing at Cairns Crescent and Nimmo Avenue, and transforming the Letham Housing Office, and the huge financial investment in the Letham Centre. Serving on the council, as you may know, Deputy Provost, can at times be a little frustrating. But I've greatly enjoyed playing my part in improving outcomes and the environment for residents across Perth Kinross. Our ward role is paramount, but it's also a privilege and a pleasure to take responsibility for issues right across the county. Also, as a senior councillor, I've been lucky to be involved in outside organisations across the country, and this has allowed me to recognise that despite our numerous challenges here in Perth Kinross, we remain a high-performing council, and this is something we should all be proud of. In closing, I wish to thank officers throughout the council for their support of me as I have sought to assist my constituents in their ambitions and priorities. Democratic services have been an ever-present guiding light on process as we have sought to take issues forward within the council, and I'm grateful for their past support as a service committee convener in the last council and a group leader in this one. Thank you especially to members of support staff, member support staff, Maureen, Fiona, Linda Simpson, Sharon and Linda Chalmers for their patience and especially their kindness. and to Stuart and Jackie for their very agreeable nourishment and hospitality. In particular, I wish to thank senior officers past and present for the opportunity to work strategically to influence the direction of this council, both in administration but also in opposition. To my colleagues on the SNP group, I hope over the last 3 years we have provided a robust, respectful and strategic opposition on the council. We have always sought to transact our business here as in administration in waiting. I'm very proud, indeed, of the record of our record in opposition. I'm sorry I didn't lead us into administration, but I have every confidence in you and your fitness and readiness to do so in the future. Thank you to councillors on the Independent and Scottish Labour group. We have, I believe, worked well together in recent times where this was appropriate and consistent with our respective visions for Perth and Kinross. To Scottish Conservative members, I'm pleased through our shared actions that the atmosphere of measured cooperation within this chamber is, in my view at least, very much better than it was 3 years ago. And in particular to my Conservative colleagues from the last administration, Councillor Shires and Lyle, I wish before I go to recognise from my position of leadership over here the strenuous efforts you make to lead your administration over there. In closing, Deputy Provost, I'm delighted to represent the County of Angus at Westminster for as long as this is required. It is once again a tremendous honour. I will, though, remain forever grateful for my role as local councillor for Perth City North and for my years working with you all on this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Dugan, MP.
That's me, I'm out.
I think Councillor Lyle we should say a few words.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Dave Dugan has represented Perth City North for the past 8 years, and the one thing that I am confident with his departure is that he will be sorely missed by his local constituents. He has always been a champion of their causes, and I am sure he will have a continued interest in their well-being going forward. On a personal note, I have always found Dave to be friendly, professional and courteous. Well, almost. Dave will be missed by us all in this chamber, possibly some more than others, but I am sure that we can all come together today and wish him well in his new role as a Member of Parliament for Angus. Thank you. Now, can I interrupt?
Oh, sorry.
Can I ask Councillor Duff to just finish my little presentation?
Sorry, Councillor Duff, then McDade.
Tap alive, lees frost. Coherle Dugan, no meisje Dugan, Bowl Parliament. Hannibal Coherle, Erentuv Shaw and Shomer Coherle. Kurmial and Naich Gost, a fall of the Turkic Parliament Eke. Bishin Yundrain, na Orich and Gali Keke, and Shomer and Shaw. Ach, Eken be na Clairshinach Hansard, a goper Shach him a Nisht. Brianach Live, Davy, Agus Gurichken. Thank you, Deputy Provost, the translation for the uninitiated. Councillor Dugan, or Mr Dugan MP, the members on this side of the Council chamber congratulate you following your election to Parliament. I'm told we will miss your Gaelic speeches in this chamber. Perhaps the hands of clerks will be working overtime. Farewell, David, and best wishes.
Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Dugan MP on his election as a Member of Parliament for Angus. What is Perth and Kinross's loss is Angus's gain, and as we lose a strong performer in this chamber, Westminster gains one. On a personal level, I would like to thank Councillor Dugan for his advice and support over the last couple of years. There were particular times where that was greatly appreciated. As leader of the SNP group, he has worked across party lines to do what is right and what is in the best interest of Perth and Kinross. Where others have tried to abandon the rules and long-standing conventions that govern this council, he has stood up and opposed those attempts, and I thank him for this. While some might view Councillor Dugan as overtly party political, I can attest that this is not the case. As someone who has diametrically opposing views on the future of the Constitution, it has not put any barriers in the way of our working together to improve things for this council and our communities. By working together over the past 2 years, we've achieved a lot, including on period poverty, the rural economy, saving fresh school meals and protecting council democracy more than a few times. And just to quantify how successful our group's working together has been, where there has been a division over the past 2 years, we have only been defeated 31% of the time. In all other cases, we have either won or drawn, and I think that's an incredible performance for any opposition to state. On behalf of the Independent Scottish Labour Group, I would like to wish him all the best in his new role as the Member of Parliament for Angus, and I'm confident of a continued strong working relationship with his successor, Councillor Lane. So good luck.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I would like to put on record the congratulations I offered to Dave Duggan on his election as MP for Angus on the day that he took the oath in Westminster. And I'll reiterate the points there that I made, that I think it's really important that both the UK Government Chamber and our Scottish Government Chamber in Holyrood have expert and experienced local government representation within those chambers, which will only be to the good of governance and the people of both countries. I'm sure that Councillor Duggan is hoping for an illustrious, if very short, Westminster career, and I'm sure that he'll understand that I wish him something longer than that. But with that, I offer my congratulations.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Mr Duggan, I think your leader alluded to this afternoon, you wanted speeches to be short and not to go on and on and on. So I'm taking his advice for this moment. So with that, we now move into private business. So I need to ask Mr Duggan MP, he will have to leave the chamber.